Record to the computer. Oh, that was easy. Okay. So we are now on chapter 4 of Amos. It's about 13 psukim, I think. So it's not too bad. Now, just to refresh, last chapter was like one of the main prophecies against the Israelites, right? Not the Judites, Israelites. Um, and we saw that a lot of the focus was on the sidelining of the poor, right, and the mistreatment of the poor, and the references. We saw that it was different people translated it differently. Whether these were, they were palaces, the Armanot, or like summer houses is what we said was one option, of the wealthy who had, certainly as we see explicitly in the last verse, Beit HaChoraf, Beit HaKaitz, right? They have winter houses and summer houses, and they are being condemned for mistreating the poor. And then, therefore, the prophecy is that those places will be demolished, right? The rich will be destroyed for having mistreated and abused the poor. And as we said, that's one of the main focuses of Amos, is the mistreatment of the poor in general. So this is very interesting who chapter 4 is directed to. We talked about also how the different prophecies open with Shim'u, listen, right? This very direct way of speaking. And so, I'm just opening up. We open with Shim'u hadavar hazeh parot habashan. Asher behar Shamron ha'oshkot dalim harotzetzot evyonim ha'omroth adonehem havi'ah v'nishte. So hear this word, you cows of Bashan, cows, on the hill of Samaria, who defraud the poor, who rob the needy, and who say to your husbands, bring and let's carouse. Okay, so what are we talking about? Right? Cows that are abusing the poor and speaking la'adonehem, to their husbands. Here they changed it to your husbands because that way it keeps it directed. To, havia v'nishtem, bring and let's party. So I does anyone, what do you have as a translation for parot?
Um, we have cows of Bashan,
Okay.
but in the footnote from Rashi, it says it's a reference to the wives of the nobles whose desire for a luxurious lifestyle drove their husbands to unjust monetary practices.
Yes, exactly, right? So it's the wives, yes, here. And then, of course, there's a question of, if they are the wives, why are they called the cows? Um, Here, my guy says, Kinui shala'ag linshe shomron ha'ashirot, right? It's a mocking way of referring to the wealthy women. Um, so that's one, is just to say that you're cows. Pirota Bashan. Bashan was the area that was taken by Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Menashe on the other side of the Jordan. And it was like very, very good land, right? That's why they want it, is so that they can pasture their animals there. And so I guess it was what are those like super fancy cows nowadays that they make the fanciest steak with? What are those? Guamu steak. What are they? Do you know what I mean? The one where they like massage the cows and the steaks cost a lot of money. No, no, clearly I don't really know myself. All right, if anyone happens to know what I'm talking about. But they're like specially known fatted cows, right? These are like the best that you can get in terms of making meat, because it's from such a good rich region. And so it's further insult perhaps to call the wives these cows. But I'm very curious to see what footnotes you have if they say something different than that. Wagyu, is that what it's called?
Yeah, Ruth, I just Googled that. American Wagyu or Wagyu,
Yeah.
Wagyu.
Okay. Thank you for confirming I'm not crazy. Okay. Awesome. And do your footnotes reflect similar to what I said? Anything interesting to add? Mm.
Just what we said. It's
Okay.
so interesting that even they're talking about cows when it's hard to picture. You think of shepherds shepherding sheep and goats. You never think of the Israelites having cows.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, but
That's a nice point
in
too.
this era, it must have been different, I guess. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think it's um, alluding to the story of Joseph, the cows that
Oh.
so, and in
Mm.
here, they are not doing what Joseph did, which is trying to help the poor and the needy, but they
Mm.
taking advantage of that. I mean, when I read the
Mm.
pasuk, I said this is the story of Joseph.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Ah,
Mm.
that,
Hmm. That's interesting. It would have further condemnation also because like my guy says that, well, that it's the men, the husbands have to dafka defraud the poor because the women have such high demand for all of these foods and things to throw these fancy banquets, and they keep demanding of their husbands, and their husbands then have to go out and somehow provide all of the material, and they do so by defrauding the poor. So that's a little bit, yeah. Okay. All right. So, nishba Hashem Elokim b'kadsho ki hine yamim ba'im aleichem v'nisa etchem betzinot v'acharitchem besirot duga. My sovereign God swears irrevocably, behold, days are coming upon you when you will be carried off in baskets, and to the last one in fish baskets. Okay, literally. So I'm curious what you have as the translation for Nishba Hashem Elokim B'Kodsho. The footnote, I mean, the little thingy here notes that literally means B'Kodsho, right? By His holiness. I'm not sure why they translate it as irrevocably.
I don't know. We have a footnote on that second
Hmm.
passage, which is these were small boats that were shield-like in appearance and were used to transport slaves. Uh,
Mm.
that's from Mitsudos. Now,
Hmm.
alternatively, from Ibn Ezra, the verse speaks not of boats, but of hooks. You will be dragged off with grappling hooks, and your children with fish hooks.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's what my guy says. C notes are kotsim, like thorns or hooks. Yeah. Hmm. Those are very different images. Okay. Um, so my guy also is that he says, why does it say Nishba Hashem Elokim B'Kodsho, right? That God swears on God's holiness. It's because for humans, right, we swear in our lives. God doesn't have a life. And so what does God swear on? God swears on God's holiness. So once again, I don't know why they switched it to irrevocably. I mean, I get it's capturing the essence, but I don't know. I don't know why they felt the need to do that. What do folks have? Do you have baskets or do you have hooks as a translation?
Um, for the translation, uh, I have you'll be carried off on shields,
Oh, you have shields. Oh, okay.
and your posterity in fishing boats.
Mm. Anyone else have something different? Mm. Okay. Um, All right. So that was like pausing halfway through the sentence. Let's see what 3 says. Ufratzim teitzena isha negda hishlachtena haharmona neum Hashem. And taken out of the city, each one through a breach straight ahead and flung on the refuse heap, declares God. Refuse heap will be carried off on the refuse, meaning of Hebrew, uncertain. Okay. So this is obviously like a very degrading way of speaking about them, that these fattened cows are going to be pulled out in an extremely degrading way and thrown out onto the garbage. Fratzim, my guy says that Fratzim, I mean, does anyone, what do you have as the translation for Ufratzim Tetzena? Do you have taken out of the city?
Through we have through breaches, and then
Okay.
put in brackets, which means they're explaining it in the wall.
Right.
They see every woman straight ahead, and you will cast off your haughtiness, the word of Hashem.
Yeah, so here in the JPS, they reworked the order of the pasuk to make it taken out of the city, each one through a breach straight ahead. Yeah, right. That the walls are going to burst. They're going to breach. The enemy's going to come and breach the walls, and the women are going to be dragged out. My guy also points out haharmona, just like the JPS said here, meaning of Hebrew uncertain, that it is uncertain what that word means. Whoops, what am I doing? Apologies. Okay.
We also have a footnote.
Okay, great.
The walls will be breached in so many places that the women will have many avenues of escape.
Oh, okay. I see. My guy also says that Harmona is not refuse heap. He says it's the corner where all the prostitutes would hang out, and that's often where the enemy would send women that they captured. Yeah. Okay. So they will be disrespected, and going along with the Yosef idea, right? You go from being a fat calf to being the skinny one, right? You go from the opposite. It's a total reversal of statuses. Okay. Bo'u Beit El upishu hagilgal harbu lifshoa veheviu leboker zivchechem lishoshet yamim ma'asrotechem. Come to Beit El and transgress, to Gilgal and transgress even more. Present your sacrifices the next morning and your tithes on the 3rd day. And then, okay, I'll add, they sort of added in here, and burn a thank offering of leavened bread. That's the beginning of 5. V'kater mechametz todah. All right. So now we're calling to come and sacrifice in the places of idol worship. One thing I listened to pointed out that this is actually where like cows were also worshipped as deities. And that would have been part of this idol worship referenced here. And so that could be another reason that the women are referred to as cows, is to connect it here.
Yeah, wasn't that a deity in Egypt?
The cow?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Mhm. All right. Mhm. Okay. All right. Okay. So we continue with verse 5. V'kater mechamitz todah, burn a thank offering of leavened bread. Ukir'u nedavot hashmi'u ki chen ahavtem b'nei Yisrael ne'um Hashem Elokim. And proclaim free will offerings loudly, right? Korban nedava is one that you give of your own free will. For you love that sort of thing, O Israelites, declares the sovereign God. I like the sarcasm here. Anyone? Yep. Okay. All right. וגם אני נתתי לכם ניקיון שיניים בכל עריכם וחוסר לכם בכל מקומותיכם ולא שבתם עדיין נאום השם. I on my part have given you cleanness of teeth, ניקיון שיניים, in all your towns and lack of food in all your settlements, yet you did not turn back to me, declares God. Okay, ניקיון שיניים. Janet, it sounds like Janet's the one who wrote the book today. What?
Wendy is going to the
Oh, yeah,
dentist.
that's right. Yeah, Wendy, tell your dentist that that's a great point.
But they say that means a lack of rich foods is what Rashi says that means.
Ah, okay. So nothing that gets stuck in the teeth.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like if you don't have meat, like meat would, be more likely to stick in your teeth than
Mm-hmm.
less expensive.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Right.
food at home. ניקיון שיניים means they don't
Sorry, what
have,
did you say?
I said, they don't have any food
Right.
because it not necessarily meat, because the second part is there isn't even bread.
Right. Right. It's a
So
clean
it's a
teeth means you're
famine.
starving.
Yeah,
Right.
famine.
Which is, yeah, I mean, I don't really associate with that, but yeah, for sure, right? And still, lo shavtem adai, you still haven't turned back to me, right? Things have gotten bad, and you still haven't done tshuva. So it seems like this is in stages. God started with a ra'av, with a famine, and now, therefore, v'gam anochi manati mikem et hageshem ve'od shlosha chodashim lakatzir v'himtarti al ir achat ve'al ir achat lo amtir chalka achat timater v'chalka asher lo tamtir aleha, tivash. Okay, what's going on here? I therefore withheld the rain from you 3 months before harvest time. I would make it rain on one town and not on another. One field would be rained upon, while another on which it did not rain would wither. Okay. So first of all, living in DC, I think we can all relate to where it's raining in one place but not another. Right. And so what's going on here with this? That it's God, first of all, it's like, okay, withholding the rain, fine, we get that. What's with the raining in one place but not another? And one field would be rained on but not another. One of the points I heard about this is that back then they would have had sophisticated enough irrigation systems to share water and be able to spread water out evenly. And so that if, let's say, it rained on one person's field and it didn't rain on another person's, the menschlich thing to do would be to share that water, right? And so both fields would be wet, even if it only rained on one of them. Whereas here, so this is actually a condemnation of the people by saying that God made it rain in one place but not another, and the place where it didn't rain, the field is dry, which means that the person upon whose field it did rain chose not to share that rain, right? And so it's a further reflection and condemnation of the bad things that the people are doing. Does that, anyone else have anything? Yeah. Okay. Also, my guy notes that what are these 3 months? Well, it would have been the 3 months between, excuse me, the 3 months leading into the middle of Nisan, right? That's when the barley harvest starts. Of course, that's Pesach, right? And that's when we stop saying the Ten Matar, right? We stop praying for rain at that point. So the 3 months before that is when God stopped the rain. Okay. Fly. Alrighty. V'na'u shtayim shalosh arim el ir achat lishtot mayim velo yispa'u velo shavtem adayin Hashem. So 2 or 3 towns would wander, right? Na'u, to a single town to drink water, but their thirst would not be slaked. yet you did not turn back to me, declares God. I've never heard of the word slaked before. Right, their thirst would not be, isn't quenched the right word for that? I don't know. What?
Slaked is a correct word.
Yeah, oh, I've never heard
They,
of that before.
yeah,
Okay,
it's like quenched,
quenched, same thing. Okay, great.
But
A long time ago, there was a beer commercial that referred to the beer as the thirst slaker. But that was a long
Really?
time ago when people, use it, but it's an archaic term.
Yeah, I don't recall ever having heard that word before.
Okay.
Um,
You weren't
okay,
born. Sorry.
but it's good. I do the New York Times word puzzles, so that's a good one to my slate as a word. Okay. So yeah, so they're wandering around, all these things. God's like, I'm doing all this stuff. How have you not done tshuva yet? Right? How have you not realized what's going on? Next one, Hiketi etchem b'shitafon uveyerakon harbot ganotechem b'charmechem ute'enechem uvizitechem yochal hagazam ve'lo shaftem adainu Hashem. I scoured you with blight and mildew repeatedly. Your gardens and vineyards, your fig trees and olive trees were devoured by locusts. Yet you did not turn back to me, declares God. So this to me, right, all these things that God did, and then they all end with V'lo shaftem adainu Hashem. This to me is like much different. Rain, okay, drought. I mean, it's terrible, but you can at least describe that to nature. This is like something crazy where you're getting blight and mildew and locusts and all these things, and you still haven't returned to God. It seems like it is on another level. Okay. Anyone have any comments, footnotes? Okay.
I mean, it sounds pretty bad that all these things happened to their crops and they didn't attribute it to Hashem. I guess they just, thought whatever they thought that it was the natural course of things.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't make them repent in any way,
Mm-hmm.
in spite of all these terrible things that happened. I mean, every possible thing that could happen to your crops and your trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. 100%. It's pretty.
Also, when
Mhm.
somebody doesn't stops believing, and they just get further proof, right? Like I knew that God is evil or doesn't exist, or like see all these things are happening and nothing good is coming out of it. So it's like they make themselves believe in what they already want to believe. So
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. It's a great point. And the 10, I think, is a good example of that also. Shilachti bachem dever b'derech Mitzrayim. Haragti b'cherev b'churechem im shevi susechem. Va'ale be'osh mechanechem uve'apechem ve'lo shaftem adainu Hashem. All right, so what does God say here? I sent against you pestilence, right? Dever, in the manner of Egypt. I slew your young men with the sword, together with your captured horses, and I made the stench of your armies rise in your very nostrils, yet you did not turn back to me, declares God. Yeah, so here, I mean, it's explicit, but we're now at the level really of what's happening in Egypt, right? And of course, the process of the makot, of the plagues, is really about the process of awakening in the Egyptians, ideally Paro also, but that fails. An awareness of God and God's supreme rule, right? Where the Khartoumim, the magicians realize it, and then the courtiers realize it. Different times, like, this is God. We can't fight this. Like, cut it out, Paro, right? And so I wonder here if it's subtle, but it's sort of saying like you're like Paro, right? You're as like heavy-hearted, and it really in denial to the degree that he was.
We have a footnote
Mm-hmm.
from Radak. It says, when you sent your youths to buy food in Egypt, I brought death and pillage upon their caravans, but still you did not repent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So making it a little bit more contemporary. Okay. All right. הפכתי בכם כמהפך פחת אלוהים את סדום ואת עמורה, ותהיו כאוד מוצל משרפה, ולא שבתם עדיין נאום השם. I've wrought destruction among you, as when God destroyed Sodom and Amorah. You've become like a brand plucked from burning. Yet, once again, you have not turned back to me, declares God. So we're just really progressing right along of the level of bad things that God has unleashed on them. And still nothing. Yeah. Okay. Now we have, after all those declarations, we have our lachen, therefore. Lachen, ko e'eseh lecha Yisrael, ekev kizot e'eseh lach, ikon likrat Elohecha Yisrael. Assuredly, because I am doing that to you, even so I will act toward you, O Israel. Prepare to meet your God, O Israel. Do we any different translations here?
Just slightly different.
Okay.
Therefore, thus will I do to you, O Israel. And then bracketed, which means they've added this word in. And because I do this to you, prepare, and then again bracketed, that means the translator added this in, to go towards your God, O Israel.
Right. Okay. So sort of what JPS said also is they had to like rearrange things in order to make it make sense.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. My guy points out, Lo Peirash Maya said there's no explanation of what God is going to do. And Mistaber Shadibur Ko E'eseh, who Lashon Iyum, right? And therefore Ko E'eseh, right? Here, like, because I'm going to do this to you, or here's what I'm going to do to this, that's the threat. Right? Just like it compares it to the language of the oath, right? You take an oath like on, it's God takes an oath that's already bad. So this is like kind of similar to that idea that we don't even have to spell out what's going to be because the fact that God's even saying it like this is enough, right? The wagging of the finger is enough.
I'm wondering how this became a verse that we use for preparation for davening. I think it's mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe it's just one of the Achronim that says about putting a belt on and washing our hands and other things that it's weird that we would take that verse from something that is such a terrible prophecy.
Right. He calmly cracked Israel, like prepare to meet God. That's very interesting. That's a good point. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I guess it's useful in its genericness at the same time. Hey, okay, so now we have a long last pasuk 13. Kihine yotzer harim uvare ruach umagid la'adam ma secho ose shachar efa v'dorech al bamate aretz Hashem Elokei tzvakot shemo. All right, behold the one who formed the mountains, yotzer harim, and created the wind, and whose wishes have been made known to mortals. I don't like that translation. Meaning of Hebrew uncertain. Okay. Who turns blackness into daybreak and treads upon the high places of the earth, whose name is God, the God of hosts. All right. Does anyone have a different translation for any of that part, especially for created the wind?
No.
Really?
If he forms mountains and creates winds, you know what? It's in some way reminiscent of a passage in Job. Where were you when I um there's a passage in there.
Yeah. So you have an amazing brain. Is it Job 28:25? Because That's if anyone, I don't know if anyone can
I,
open
I don't
that. I
know
don't
if
have it in
I
front of
don't
me.
have the reference in here, but I know there's a passage in Job. Where were you when I created, the winds,
Hmm.
the rain, and laid the foundations of the earth? There's this whole, when Job
Hmm.
was complaining and protesting. Um, uh,
Great. Yeah. Well, we can check. Let's check if it's 28, 25. Um, yes. Okay, great. Um, what was I going to say? And treads upon that. I don't know. Yeah, what do you think of this as a conclusion or this last pasuk? My guy says it's possible it's connected to the previous one, right? So that 12 and 13 really should be read together, and that Hikon Likrat Elohecha Yisrael is kind of, I think, part of that forceful conclusion of prepare to meet your God.
I think preparing to meet your God implies that you're going to die or be
yeah,
destroyed. I
yeah,
mean, that's even an idiom in English, right? Like prepare to meet your
Meet your
maker.
maker, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And we have in the stone um, um, Tanakh, we have the O Israel, and therefore will I do to you, O Israel, bracketed, and because I do this to you, prepare, and then bracketed to go towards your God, O Israel, which
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
I guess is basically the same meaning.
Right. So it's I mean it's I guess it's just such an interesting conclusion in that it's like not really a conclusion. I mean, my guy even points out that Hashem Elokeinu Tzvakot Shmo, that God, whose name is God, the God of hosts, that could either be the concluding part of these two verses and what comes before, or it could just be its own statement, just a praising of God, right? Um, which really changes how you end this chapter. Are we ending with like praising God, even if it's in the context of, punishing the people, or are we ending with like part of this curse to you is, that God is the Almighty, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm confused about the translation of Ose Shachar Ephah, um,
Mm-hmm.
because the book that I have translates it in reverse, as if he's
Mm.
turning daylight into darkness, which is
Uh,
different from turning blackness into daybreak.
Yeah,
So,
mm.
yes, so does my translation in the stone.
which
uh,
is a whole
Same
different
with
message.
mine.
It's
Yeah,
like I'm turning
he turns
daylight
dawn
into
into
dark.
darkness.
Right. It's doom. It's a
Mm.
doom prophecy as opposed to reversing it at the end and offering hope. So it's a very
Mm.
different reading depending how you translate that phrase.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, my guy also sides with you. So what did they put here? Emendation yields darkness. Okay, that doesn't help us though. Yeah, why did they do that?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Turn dawn into darkness is a pretty bad. Uh, that doesn't leave you a
Yeah.
lot of hope.
Hmm. I don't know. Hmm, I don't know.
I mean, Rashi just comments that metaphorically he humbles the haughty, but uh,
Hmm.
that doesn't do it for me.
Right. It's not, yeah. So yeah, no, I mean, this chapter is interesting because it starts with something very concrete, right? There's no rain, then and there's some famine, and it really is going back. I, it, I mean, I guess it's like it's similar to the plagues, I feel like I talk about the plagues a lot, but in that it's the undoing of creation in that sense, right? We're regressing in terms of our the very nature of the world, right? It goes from something that is relatable, like drought, and is then we get rid of all the trees and and the crops, and now we're going back to like borei ruach, right? Ruach, that's a very primitive primordial word, um, and daybreak and darkness and light and conflating those. I mean, that it's really regressive. And that the undoing of the world is something that happens, I think, in stages all around us. Is also very interesting. Yeah, Charlotte.
Yeah, I don't know why this just popped into my head, but it
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of like the sassy mom disciplining their child. I brought you
Okay.
into this world and I can take you out
Okay, yeah, I like that.
on
Yeah.
a much smaller scale.
Right. Yeah, I know, but it's right. Appreciating everything God gave you. Yeah, nothing is to be taken for granted. Yeah, beautiful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it all starts with the wives here. I know.
Who knew?
I know. Who knew? Who knew? It's not good for us, the fat cow wives. Yeah. Like, um, yeah. So, if any other comments?
I think
Okay.
what you said about, I mean, it goes back to Bereshit.
Yeah.
It's
Right, undoing creation.
Yeah.
I had the same thought, Janet.
Mm-hmm.
going backwards.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also interesting that, that's something that like we can trigger, right? That it's, Stoman Amorah, I mean, we don't know. It seems like didn't get any of those warnings ahead of time. Maybe they did, right? But here it happens in stages. It's progression. I mean, it's progressive, it's regressive, right? But it's in stages. Which it was one thing, I think that is interesting, that's something we can all learn from, is that the destruction of the world as we know it isn't necessarily something that has to happen in some like massive, world changing, meteor crashing into Earth. It can also just be something that we witness happening slowly.
There's a lot of science fiction about a gentle progression into doom. And
Oh
these
yeah.
are, yeah, like, the Earth is, for instance, the Earth is getting hotter and we just don't notice it, like the allegory, like the frog in the pot, and he doesn't
Right.
realize that he's boiling. And the sun is getting dimmer and we can't pick up we can't distinguish it because we get used to it over time. And then the next thing you know is like, life on Earth as we know it is gone.
That has an environmental message for today,
Right.
doesn't it?
Yeah, well, a lot of science
Mhm.
fiction now is environmental in terms of its message. It used to
Oh
be
really? Oh,
used to be
interesting.
nuclear annihilation, and then, people are emerging from caves afterwards, and now it's sort of gone into this environmental catastrophe.
Yeah, so it's like every year it's getting hotter
Right.
and drier.
Mhm. Yeah.
So before we sign off,